All right, back at it, Athlete Builder. I'm in the library. I'm Jim Beebe, host of this week's episode. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Bill Brown, Esquire. It's not often we have attorneys on the show, but we're gonna talk slowly for him. And I make those jokes so tongue in cheek. My dad was an attorney, and oftentimes he would get joke books. But Bill came to us through Kenny Bigby, former guest on the podcast, and recommended getting a hold of Bill. And so I reached out to him as Bill was gracious enough to have us on. So Bill, the attorney, we're going to get into a number of things today, all things mental, physical, and how to improve in a lot of different areas. We have great things to talk about with his swimming event coming up, his concerns about the nation itself, people themselves, and how they could be better mentally and physically. So that dovetails really well with the premise of the show there and how we try to win the day. So, Bill, thanks for being on the show, man. We appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, Jim, it's an honor to be on the show. Thank you for having me. And shout out to my buddy, Kenny Bigby, fellow team guy. We went through buds together. That guy is a phenomenal American.
He had nothing but great things to say about you.
I hate him.
But you're out on the East Coast now, right? You're a Jersey guy?
Yeah, I spent 8 years in the military, 3 deployments. Last one was in Iraq. I got out. I used a GI Bill. I kind of fell in love with learning. Winded up going to Rutgers Law School, and yep. So that's where I'm here in Jersey. God only knows why.
You born and raised there?
Yeah, kind of like a bass fish. Get out, you see the world, travel the 7 seas, and somehow you wind up back the same creek.
Gotcha. It says here, growing up sports-wise, football, wrestling, and cross country. No swimming is noted there. And then I look on your resume and it says combat swimmer.
That's it.
So connect the dots there from high school playing sports to deciding, you know what, maybe the military is the route for me.
Sure. I think, I think sports is such a great endeavor as life lessons, team building, adventure, like living a full life. And competition is and team competition is, they build so many things. So a couple things. One is every male member of my family was in the military. My one grandfather was in World War II. My other grandfather was in the Army during the Korean War, but he played baseball actually. My father was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And so a lot of my uncles too. So being in the military background was pretty kind of a stable line in my family, and definitely brings a lot of character. For me, I kind of like a lot of guys in the military, rough and tumble, blue collar families. What happened for me as far as I was like a lot of us, we all have our own flaws or tough cards that we were given. I was given a couple tough ones. And one of the things that helped me when I was younger is a lot of my aggression I had because of, getting dealt some tough cards or this or that was sports. And it's funny how a lot of families out there now is they actually think it's not an intellectual pursuit to have their children in football or some of these, or wrestling or boxing, some of these competitive sports. But I actually totally disagree, because I think it builds a certain sense of a mindset that keeps guys sharp, and it builds a certain confidence you don't get in other avenues, especially football, which is a team sport. You take some hard hits. You learn about victory through glory. You learn how to deal with loss. And it's the same thing with wrestling, because my grandfather, Bill Brown, he was a big wrestler. So then my dad picked up wrestling, and then he tried to teach me the same thing. And I learned a lot of hard lessons in a wrestling mat, especially about the grind. And one of the things a lot of people who haven't wrestled before, like I started some jujitsu now, and when I was a young guy in the SEAL teams, it just started picking up. And I had a lot of mat experience. So I normally did pretty good against those guys, but every once in a while I'd get caught in something that would make me respect it because it's a different art. It's more of like a sniper's art. And some of the guys, I think they'll get too comfortable on their back. They really don't have good takedown skills, but they are sharp and they can catch you. One of the things about wrestling, though, is I thought similar to boxing, because I went through a real bad divorce and I picked up boxing for a couple years to help purge. And I think wrestling and boxing are slightly different, where there's a certain grind to each of those. Like when you're out like really training hard, you're drenched in sweat, and the intensity level is a lot higher. And there's also something different about boxing too, is because in boxing, someone's trying to knock you out. And what happens is you learn how to react in certain situations, and it builds a certain form of toughness, a certain form of confidence, and a certain form of comfortability under like combative stress. And I think those attributes are great in all avenues in life. And so I am very grateful for those experiences, and they all had a huge impact for me. So, things are a lot different now, but for me, when I was coming up, my my perspective my perspective on things that were important was estrewed. I had misplaced values. And one of the things I ran, because I had misplaced values that influenced my decision making, I winded up getting myself in some jams. Now, one of the things that helped me, so as far as running, because I gave different attributes that different sports helped contribute to my mentality, especially my mentality as a SEAL, and helped me get through BUDS, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. But another one of those experiences is cross country. Now, my father was a vet, and he was the first person in my family to go to college, and he used a GI Bill. He went to Rutgers, got an accounting degree. But what happened was he couldn't get a job, so he took a test with the state of New Jersey, and because of his civil service preference for veterans, he scored at a certain position where they had to give him a job, his first accounting job at a state hospital. The problem he ran into is his boss was corrupt, and he wanted my dad to fudge the numbers. My dad wouldn't fudge the numbers, so he treated my dad like shit to try to push him out. This is the first job my ever dad got, so he just dealt with it. He didn't fudge the numbers, and he just got treated like shit for a while. But one of the ways he did to purge it is he did these long distance runs. Now, my dad was kind of an interesting cat because my grandfather, who was also a veteran, he was a very strong Catholic, like straight, like as Catholic as they get. But he was also a man, and he loved having sex. He winded up having 9 kids.
Mm.
So he's busted. He didn't have a college education. He busted his ass his whole life, working 3 jobs, like, working at the morgue, as a janitor, as a butcher, you name it, he did it. But he busted his ass his whole life to get those 9 kids, to raise those 9 kids. Now, my dad was the oldest, and he saw that. So he was scared of that. And so one of the things he did is when he got out of the military, like he used a GI Bill, right? And then he used the GI Bill as a platform with the civil service exam, to get his first job. So once he got his first job in accounting, and the guy, his boss, was a crook, he couldn't quit on it, right? So how did he purge? He started running. But my dad was chasing it. He was chasing it like some guys chase glory. He wanted to, in his mind, he wanted to make it in a way that my grandfather didn't, where he didn't have to bust his ass forever. And so the only way I got to spend time with my dad, because not only is he working at this job, but he's also taking night courses because he's trying to upgrade his level of education. And he winds up getting his master's and CPA, NBA, all that stuff. So he's on the hunt that way. But I'm a rough and tumble kid, and we're living in Browns Mills, New Jersey, which is a very very, very, very blue collar town as they get. And so the only time I got to spend with him is I'd get up early in the morning and run with him, or when he would get home in between class or and after school, whatever, and I'd run with him at night. And those long distance runs, I hated anyone who does long distance running. It sucks. But one of the things it did is it taught me about life. And a lot of times life sucks, but you keep going. And so for me, like I found myself in some really hard times in my life, but it's kind of like stoicism, and the real stoic, the mentality of it is, it's like the David Goggins type of mentality. It's like, I'm going to put myself through this really like intense type of situations to prepare and harden my brain for when life fucking cracks me. And life does crack you. And so long distance running, wrestling, football, and then, when I picked up a little boxing in the SEAL teams. And then when I got out, going through a tough divorce, and all those attributes really propelled me. Now, I really didn't know about, I could swim, but I was nowhere near the level of a SEAL. And I actually so what happened to me was, I was rough and tumble kid, blue collar town, I was bumping around. I was born with a cleft palate, and I was a kind of good looking guy. And so what would happen was, I wound up playing musical houses with different family members, because I was hard to handle. And I was a good looking guy. I'm going to different places, and other guys, there's nothing like a new good looking kid in a school, and they're going to get the girls' attention. They're going to get other people's wrath. So guys would try to, push me out from the competition, and some, kids can be brutal with each other. And one of the things that happened with me is, because I was engaged in sports my whole life, I was athletic. And so normally I could handle myself pretty well. There's a couple fights I lost, but normally I did all right. I definitely had some street cred, made some bad decisions. I was up in the detention center for a little bit, and being white in the detention center ain't no joke. And so, I was getting in, I was fighting pretty hard there too. So I winded up getting myself in some very close to ruining my life. Very, very close. And one of the things that happened to me was, I realized that where I was at in New Jersey, with the group of guys I was hanging with, it wasn't a bright future for me. And I was out on my own the day I turned 18. And so I'm out there hustling, working these BS jobs, not making anything. And so I had this family pedigree in my background about, men who have served our country. And so I gave it a shot, and the Navy 100% saved my life. So what happened with me with these different athletic attributes that I was given, that helped really build me in a lot of different ways, was, I was young, I was athletic. I definitely when I went to go to try out for BUD/S, the screening test, I failed the first 3 times because of swimming, but I kept coming back. And one of the things that happened, there's a couple things that happened with sports, because I would engage in sports, and it was such a healthy outlet for me, is that even like when I was in detention center, I was working out pretty heavy. And I got to tell you the truth, like, some of those workouts I was doing in the detention center were pretty almost as tough as some of the workouts I've done in the SEAL teams or in BUD/S. Like, we would we'd fill hefty bags, trash bags with water. We'd tie them up on the mop sticks. We'd be doing curls that way. We'd be doing pull-ups off the cell block stairs. We were doing dips off the tabletops. We'd be doing these big push-up routines in the cell blocks, just the cells just walking down. So I was I was in pretty good shape. And so some of those experiences I had there too, like, because different things happen, and sometimes things would pop off, sometimes kind of quick. And so I was kind of, uh, I was used to a certain level of violence and a certain and picking up reads and knowing when you have to act sometimes. And so one of the things that happened to me is once, even though I failed the screening test for swimming, I kept coming back. And all the other guys in my boot camp division that failed, they didn't keep coming back. And I had an instructor that took me under his wing. And instead of having me do the test, he literally spent like 2 hours with me just trying to upgrade, teaching me a modified breaststroke. And I barely passed the fourth time, and that got me orders to buds. And then he had there was an interesting period of my life because after A school or after boot camp in the Navy, they had something called an A school. And mine was to be an electrician. And then I would go to buds because the way it was is the attrition rate at buds, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, was so high that you had to get a job or a rate in the Navy. So, because the majority of guys weren't going to make it, they would have a job lined up for them when they got out. So, what happened for me was that I had 6 months while I was going to A school, and they had this program where all the guys who were signed up for the special programs would get up early in the morning and do these workouts that were pretty intense. And a lot of it got me in super good shape. And then the other thing it did is it got me a lot more accustomed to the water because a lot of the stuff was really heavily like in the pool type of stuff. And like I imagine some of the stuff like a really good high school swimming team or like a college swimming team, the type of workouts they would have. It was like serious stuff. So once I winded up going to buds, my water proficiency level was way up. And the other thing I had going for me was, I think sometimes the mentality is when you don't have a safety net at the end of this thing, there's a certain grind to it. There's a certain grind that guys have. And I think I didn't have a safety net. And I think one of the other things that really helped me propel was like everybody I knew kind of, for one reason or another, I think had these mislabeled perspectives of my potential. And I knew that this was a shot for me. And I was like a pit bull, and I was not going to give up on that thing. And so that's kind of the trajectory for me and how I winded up in the whole Bud SEAL world from high school.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a pretty in-depth answer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cross currents there. You talked about football. Yes, team sport. You win and lose as a unit, same as any other team sport or military team or financial team, you name it. We've coached a bunch of wrestlers, more football players than wrestlers, but we've coached wrestlers, and I'm always in love with having them in the gym because when you're used to having your face smashed into the mat for any period of time, me asking them to carry some weight or put weight on their back in the barbell is no big deal to them. Like they don't back down from that. They're used to so much pain that this is no big deal. And one of your points about, with sports building your confidence with the violence that goes along with it, or the overall just tension and pressure, anxiety, I always say confidence comes from reps. You can have some hope, you can have some, belief you can do things, but you don't really earn the knowledge and the confidence till you've done things. And when you've been in enough, to your words, you've been in enough pain for long enough, you can handle more pain. You said you were knocked around, you were getting in fights, you were basically in jail as a kid, and you're getting going from house to house. There's a lot of mental trauma there. There's a lot of physical trauma when you're fighting and you're doing those sports. And then you're into distance running, which is just simply holding another threshold of pain just for longer. The wrestling world is 2 minutes around, but sometimes those training sessions go 10 minutes of nonstop sparring, 15, 20, 30 minutes of nonstop sparring. They turn the heat up to 120 degrees. And you being an East Coast guy, I got to wonder if you've come across Zach Evanesh at all, because he's big into that whole mindset. So you take those cross currents and you have the family background of being in the military.
I believe he runs the underground gym.
He sure does. And we used on our episode a few weeks ago.
He's a badass. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I don't know if you've been on the show or not, but I can connect you. And you guys should really, you guys are two guys that should get together, because it'll be a lot of fun. And then you find some identity and purpose and a way out. And I'm not trying to align what my life has been like with you in SEAL training, but I understand what it's like to go all in on something. When I started my gym, I emptied all my retirement accounts, all my insurance policies, took all the cash I had, and I just left the banking world and put it all into this 10,000 square foot facility with no clients. And I'm like, wow. I borrowed money to start everything, and people are like, well, man, you don't really have any other backup plan. I said, no, it's probably the only way I can keep going, because if I have another out, I'm never going to be in, So again, not nearly the stress that you guys have been through. I don't want to liken it to anything in the
that's
military.
your livelihood at stake. You put all the chips on the table.
It's me, and I was divorced similar to you, and I had 3 kids with me, 50% of the time. So there was pressure, right? And pressure is a gift when you use it. So I kind of, I could see why you went the military route. But was there any thought, Army Ranger, Army Green Beret, other special forces, why the Navy, why in the water,
That's a great question. So when I went in, the SEAL teams was not like it is now. I went in 1997. I had no idea what the SEAL teams were. Never heard of them before, to be sincere.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go in to be a commando. I didn't go in for an adventure, though God knows that's what I really needed in my life. I just wanted to go in to get a trade. I just wanted to get a trade and go to college. And I wanted to serve my country. And because I had the way my assessment was, and it was a pretty accurate assessment when I look back at it now, is sometimes you're in an environment that you're set up to lose in. And I was set up in an environment where I was set up to lose because I really didn't have a great support system.
Mm-hmm.
And the support system I had was a lot of young guys like me in similar circumstances. And maybe individually we weren't really bad guys just dealing with the, tough cards. But you put us together and we were making poor decisions. We weren't really helping each other out. And you start to see a pattern, and you're like, I got to get out of this orbit. It's not going to be good for me. So what do I, my advice is it's real easy to see what's happening. And, a lot of people say like, birds of a feather flock together type of thing,
Right.
And there's a lot of truth to that. If the guys or your friends, the individuals you're associating with, and there's a certain pattern forming, well, chances are there's going to have a strong gravitation to you and your opportunities in your future. And so why the Navy? The Navy wasn't to what my one pappy was a World War II veteran. And I had a lot of respect for him. And I think that was my biggest gravitational pull. I first wanted to be a Marine, but they did a background check on me and they said no. And so I went into the Navy and I was honest with them, told them, the stuff I got in was like, fights. That's pretty much it. But there was a few of them. And I got expelled. I got expelled from Burlington City High School, which is a Abbott district, which means in New Jersey it's a very poor performing school district, and it gets extra funding. And there's not too many white guys. And so one of the things that happened was I had this family background. My pappy went to World War II. And I think I did it in some way to kind of honor him. And I wasn't looking to be a commando. That was not, I didn't have it. I just wanted to learn a trade and possibly get money for college and serve my country. So, yep.
Okay. Well, when I talked to Kenny and he mentioned Bill Brown, I thought, well, I remember Bill Brown being referenced in Goggins' book.
Yeah.
The first one, Can't Hurt Me.
Yep.
So I had already been through it. And so, in preparation for today, I reread most of it. And just in the acknowledgments section alone, it says, to the white David Goggins, Bill Brown, your willingness to go the distance in the hardest of times made me better in the hardest of times. Last time I saw you, you were on a mission in Iraq. I was manning the 50 cal, and you were manning the M60. Hope to see you stateside in the future. And then I saw on your bio, you're in Bud's class 231, and I think that's the same one that Goggins was in. So I go back earlier chapters, and one of the awesome chapters was on taking souls.
Yep.
And we can you can't kill boat crew 2. So I pulled that up, and then he says that this is the middle of Hell Week, and I turned to Brown, and I guess essentially he referred to you as the freak.
To be sincere, that was like, if someone called me that to my face, we were fighting. Like I was not a gentle guy back then.
Sure.
But I understand like the reasons for it now. Some of it was the instructors threw that label on me because I came in there. I made a mistake. I came in there. What happened was I came in there kind of cocky. And as far as academically, I was in outer space. And so there was a couple evolutions in buds where, they're testing to see where you're at academically. And I spot checked it myself, and then I was pretty cocky, and there was 2 combinations or disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in an atmosphere where the strategy is to be the gray man. I was like neon bright. So I got the hammer. Like I got the hammer. But one of the they were brutal, bro. But it was a brutality that I needed. It was the best medicine for me. And when imagine this. You're in a boat crew with a guy like David Goggins, right? And in an atmosphere where it pays to be a winner. And all your competitions are basically physical competitions. Like you're racing some log, you're racing some boat. You're basically fighting to take over some boat. And who do you got rolling with you? People didn't know who David Goggins was back then, but I sure as hell did because he was in my boat crew. So that's like having like a Ferrari engine. You know what I mean? People didn't know it was a Ferrari, but if you're riding it, you sure as hell know it can ramp up fast. And so one of the big things, especially in first phase, is because they're trying to build this mentality. And I'll tell you that the first real experience where I noticed how distinct it was. But what they're trying to do in a situation where there's like war, where it pays to be a winner, right? There's a certain they call it the predatory mindset, where that's it. It's either you perform or you pay. And so what they would do is they would have a series of competitions with different boat crews. And if your boat crew wins, you get a little break. If not, you're paying. And so having a guy like that in your boat crew with that mentality, and don't forget, like we had like Chris Kyle was in our boat crew. Imagine being in a boat crew with Chris Kyle and David Goggins.
Dang.
That's going to change your disposition in life forever.
that goes back to your point about the birds of a feather. You know, so many people will say, you want a glimpse of your future, show me the 5 people you hang out with the most.
Yeah.
So when you surround yourself with that kind of talent, that kind of mentality, that elite level performer, man, you're either going to wash out because you don't belong there, or you're going to elevate and
well,
make your bones with them.
There's a lot to that too. The other thing is, because I look at that too, and I could say, I mean, these are world class like performers on a huge level, and I could say, well, maybe is that my pedigree, or was maybe I would ride in their coattails? I don't know. I can tell you one thing: I put out as hard as I fucking could,
Sure.
and I did my best to always be a good swim buddy. But I can, yep.
Well, what David said in his book, it says, you know why I call you the freak? It's because you are one of the baddest men I've ever seen in my damn life. And he goes on to say, you know what I say to these motherfuckers right now? Let's throw this shit up high and show them who we are. Because you guys had the boats sitting there on your head, right?
Yeah, well, it's more than that.
And so you guys are middle of it, and the next shift is getting ready to come. And he wanted to take people's souls, he said in that book. So let's show them that this doesn't break us. This doesn't hurt us. Their training on training us won't break us, and we're going to show them we're already ready. So now he wanted to occupy, he said, space or real estate in the instructor's brains, that they're going to be thinking twice about boat crew too.
Well, there's a couple of things to that. That was I know exactly what that moment was. It reminds me of this 9 Inch Nails song. Nothing can stop me now, 'cause I don't care anymore. So in this situation, we didn't have the boats in our head. We had an extended arm. And it's suck factor, bro. It's
right.
Shaking like this, shaking. And it's at you could look around. And everybody's spirit, when you talk about taking souls, is fucking like, Jesus Christ, this fucking sucks. And then when he said that, there's a certain beauty to madness sometimes, a certain beauty to madness. And it was like all of a sudden, not just me, but everybody in that boat crew could see the beauty in that madness. And all of a sudden, we just start slamming the boats up in the air. And all of a sudden, it reversed that whole defeat mentality. This sucks. We're getting our asses handed to. We don't give a fuck. And it was, and that type of, that's real beauty.
Yep.
And to me, that shows me that things in life can change so fast. Like you think all of a sudden it's one way. Well, it's not always one way. It's such a mentality, because all of a sudden, if you just get a group like that and just switches and says, no, fuck you, bam.
Right.
And it was not just the instructors, everybody we were in class with saw the beauty in that. They loved that shit.
Well, you have a moment and someone leads, and then there's a little bit of an adrenaline boost, and they see someone else is getting through it. So then they're inspired. So they see they're going to get through it. Then it increases your hope. And then the whole goal is just one more step, right? Get through the next step, get to the point where you get to eat again, and then relax a little bit. And you listen to Jocko's podcast, and he'll talk about something bad happens, and he says his response is good. Yeah. There's a good chance, that's great, because it gives us other things, that we could focus on or work on. And it changes your mindset. This lady we had on a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Taryn, she said when something shitty's happened to you, don't ask yourself, why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, why is this happening for me? And if I'm sitting there and I'm Bill Brown and I'm thinking, man, I'm in this shitstorm. Why? And I ask, why is this happening to me? Well, you'd say, oh, because I chose this. But if you ask, why is this happening for me? And you can answer the question, well, because it's going to put me through this crucible where on the other side, I'm a whole new man on a whole new trajectory. That's why this is one of the reasons why this is happening for me. and I'm going to utilize this and get through it. So then I take this moment, and now it's a teachable moment to myself, or it's a reflection point later where I can look back and be like, hey, I did this. I can handle pain in the future.
That's right.
That's why for me it's such an attractive and impressive endeavor, because it's like I don't think I've suffered like that before, and other people haven't gotten through it. And I say, man, how strong are they mentally now? Because you don't get that strong without that pain, right? But now you have it, and you have this reference point. Man, what a gift they gave themselves of getting through that. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, they say like you don't know who you are, until you find out. And sometimes, like when the rubber meets the road, you're gonna find out some things, And there's a couple ways I look at things. There's sometimes, like I try to be a tactician. And sometimes I go, okay, what do I do here? Because do I have a high tolerance for pain? 100% I do. But if you look at like a good boxer, right, like Floyd Mayweather, the art of boxing is to get hit and not get hit. And I think that's always the ideal way to go. I think the way I went through buds was 100% not the ideal way. I was just so young and really naive, and I paid heavily for it. And I got some brutal lessons that really shaped my psyche and my spirit 100%. Lessons I needed to learn. So the first way I go is I like when I talk to my son, and I talk to my son, about risk assessment. I say, well, the first form of self-defense is proper risk assessment. And the first thing is to keep yourself out of high risk situations. And then it's like, okay, I'm in a situation where I'm in a combative atmosphere. Like, well, what do I do? Well, the first form is to go, okay, how can I Floyd Mayweather this thing? How can I tactically, attack without getting beat up, without, having to deal with pain and lots of it. And then, then it's like, okay, if I'm in a slugfest, how can I gas this guy? How can I gas this guy? Or how can I take it? If they're a wrestler, let me keep it on my feet. If they got no hands, how can I take it to the mat real fast? And I think that's one of the ways I deal with a lot of things. Or how can I be a diplomat? If possible, how can I make a deal? How can I compromise? So I think, and I think that's kind of what a good coach or a good trainer would do too. You think about it, a good coach or a good trainer is going to assess the other team, going to assess the other opponents, going to evaluate their weaknesses and strengths, going to evaluate their team's weaknesses and strengths, and figure out, okay, we're in a competitive atmosphere here. How can I maximize on their flaws, and how can I capitalize on, our talent? And I think that's what good business should do too.
Sure.
So, these are all like sports analogies that I think make a lot of sense in today's, environment, because and then a lot of times you think about rules, because in sports you have rules, right? Well, what happens? What do you do if the other side's not playing by the rules, and the refs or the umpires looking the other way? Well, you'd be foolish if you kept playing by the rules yourself, right? So I think you have to realize, like, when it's a away game and it's stacked against you, and I think you have to act accordingly.
You talked about learning a lot of hard lessons from buds and from being in the teams.
Yep.
And it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that earlier on when you were younger, you were a hard charger. Someone calls you a name and you're all in, you're already ready to fight, which is not really that stoic, right? So you then have this what seems like this switch where, all right, you can still be tough as nails, but there's no sense of me standing there with my hands down, getting hit in the face all day long. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe I can be, like you said, a tactician. Was there a moment in the teams, or maybe you're on deployment, where you had this switch where I don't need to fight every fight. I don't need to be the first one through there with my face getting beat on, where you learn some maturity or some humility, and you decide, hey, maybe there's a better way here. Yeah, I can be tough as nails, but there's also could be a smarter way to do some things. Was there like a moment or a period of time where you thought, where that all evolved, and you say, hey, this is why I changed. This is how I knew I was different. Anything like that at all?
Well, I had a couple experiences. I think a lot of times there's different variables that kind of play in.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of them I was in this they called it a program, the Burlington Day program, and it was out of Burlington County. And originally I'd be like in detention center, and then after a while I'd be in detention center, and then I'd go to this Burlington Day program, and then back to detention center, then Burlington Day program, and I'm back at my house, Burlington program. Well, I was in the Burlington Day program, and a couple experiences happened. One is, if you're white and you're in that type of environment, you have a target on you, 100%. And so, I wound up rock and rolling a little bit, and I got my ass handed to me once by this guy Brickhouse. And so you realize when you get your ass beat up pretty bad, you realize like Billy Badass can't beat everybody out there, and every once in a while you're going to get rocked. And so it's like rock, paper, scissors, it's like, all right, well, then how can I get more numbers to neutralize the threat, or that type of assessment? So I had that kind of experience that I realized, hey, physically, as far as in that type of environment, I was solid, but not to say that when there's multiple guys and just some dudes that bigger, stronger, whatever, you're going to get your ass kicked sooner or later. So I had that experience. And then and it's one thing, right? It's one thing to be like, and one of the things I love, like when I boxed, is when I would spar, I'd be so nervous before, but afterwards, no matter what happened, and normally I did pretty good. Sometimes I lost, sometimes I got rocked a little bit, but normally I did pretty good. But no matter what happened on a drive back, I always felt like a sense of accomplishment, But it's different in that type of environment, even though you can get knocked out and you can get dropped. In a street fight or in an incarceration type of environment, it's similar to war, but it's different, right? When guys are getting shot, it's lethal. In that type of environment, it can be lethal, but not as much. But you can get jacked up pretty bad. And so so when you realize that it's different than in a controlled atmosphere. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, so those experiences absolutely had impact, because now all of a sudden, once you're going through like a commando unit, you're going through in the SEAL teams, you're going through different training, is that you can't, it's all about calculated risk and reducing those risks by tactics. That's really what it's about. You're engaged in everything SEALs do is high risk. You're jumping out of airplanes, you're diving with explosives, you're jumping out of airplanes in the middle of the night with explosives and guns. You're doing snatch and grabs in the middle of the night against terrorists. You're doing sniper ops against bad dudes. When I was in Iraq, we guarded in 2004, 2005, we guarded the top 5 dignitaries in Iraq and Afghanistan. There was like the highest value targets in the world. Like everything you did is high risk. And so what do you try to do is you try to reduce those risks by your performance and by your tactics. And so, you can't get through buds You cannot get through buds by yourself. That's why having a guy like David Goggins or I serve with a lot of beautiful men. Those guys, they really evaluate your like my self-evaluation, my predisposed limitations I had were just blown apart because all of a sudden I'm interacting with guys who came from Ivy League, schools, and guys who are athletic, like Division I athletes. And here I am, a blue collar kid, just somehow barely made it into the Navy. And now
You're hanging. You're hanging.
well, I don't know hanging is the right word. I
Well,
had
you're surviving.
yes. And you know what I told? That's so right. And
sometimes a lot of times that's the win.
That's it, brother. That is the win. I told a young kid because sometimes young kids coming up looking to, become American warriors reach out to me. And I was giving them a pre-buds talk, and I said, that's exactly what I said. I said, if the structures are on you like I said, sooner or later you're going to mess up, and the heat is going to be on. And the instructors are going to be on you like a wasp because they're going to check everybody. It's just like if you're going to jail, like you are going to get checked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like they're going to check everybody. And they're going to be on you. And you're going to feel like it's the end of the world. And the pressure is going to be heavy. But I said, if all that matters is every day you're there, your day to closer to graduation.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just, be that quarterback in the pocket. Stay calm. If you messed up, do whatever you can to fix it. And I said, just survive, and hopefully it'll pass. But that's it, surviving.
It's so much where I was telling my son Jack yesterday. He was leaving home for the weekend. He was home for the weekend, but he plays football at Ball State, which is a local Division I school here in Indiana.
Congrats.
Thanks. And he's doing fine. He's working hard. And, one of our core values at the gym, one of the core values with Athlete Builder is the word sisu, which is from Finland. And I'm not from Finland, but it's the mantra for the entire country. And essentially, it's not really translatable, but it means like guts or entrails. And metaphorically, what it means is when you are at the lowest point, when you're suicidal, when you're looking at addiction, you just hang on and don't quit, right? In a way, so that's one of the guiding principles. But I also told Jack that there's more to it than just that. Like when you're running a sprint and it's a 100-yard sprint, some people run to the line or they stop short. Mm-hmm. They also quit. You want to run through the line, right? It's not a life or death situation, but it becomes life or death because if you're always running through the line, doing a little bit more, seeing the task all the way through to completion, that becomes your identity in your life, right? And if you're always quitting short, then that's also who you are. So it is life or death. And when you're thinking about who's really going to be great and who's really not going to be great, it's all about quitting in that instance. And he goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, at some point tomorrow on Monday, you're going to have maybe an hour worth of work. If you go in early and have the trainer work on you just to do some prehab stuff. Then you'll have your 45 minutes of sprints and then an hour and 15 minutes of lifting. And then most people go home. They're done for the day. They have X number more hours left in the day, but they kind of quit on training." I said, if you just don't quit and hang on a little bit longer, do some extra work, do some other things that no one else did, you didn't quit, you went and did more, then you're going to be better prepared. Some people will quit and not prepare their food for the week. If you don't quit and get that stuff done, you're going to your point, Bill, you're going to minimize your risk. You're going to feel yourself better. You're less likely to be injured, right? You're going to perform better. So all these other people, they have a 24-hour day and they're going to quit at some point and say, all right, I'm going to go have fun and do other things. Totally great. You need to relax. And I get that. But others won't quit and they'll just keep working and they'll keep grinding and then they'll keep pushing. And then they keep elevating themselves. And I say, don't even talk football. You can be, you're an attorney. And I said, I've been in the financial world. Some people quit at 5 o'clock and go home. Well, if I was the one guy that quit at 5:30 every day, I get extra 2.5 hours of work on Monday through Friday than everyone else did. I quit a little bit later. I got more. I advanced more. So a lot of times the wins and losses personally and professionally is hanging on longer than the next guy, and you keep doing it over and over again. You stack those wins, and the compound interest effect kicks in. And next thing you know, those people that were with you, they're not even close to you anymore.
I love how you're talking about compound interest. And you know what you're talking about. I've seen that play out so often, like high level achievers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like if you jump in, you're bound to get wet. I read this book, and one of the things that happened to me when I was young and incarcerated is I wound up reading, and I wound up reading a lot. And I think reading is one of those things in life that can, yep,
Right.
I think it's one of the greatest ways to really build a lot, because it's not just reading, it's building this creativity because you're imagining everything that's reading, and then you're weighing it out. It's a heavy lift in a lot of ways mentally. But when one of the things you talk about, and I've seen this with so many high level achievers, and I'll give a short kind of version of it. It's a book called Ender's Game. In this book, they take all these high intelligent students to train them to be like future space commanders against this alien force. And what happened is they have a spaceship where it's basically like a Harvard level military school. And it's similar to Buds, where it's a series of competitions is how they're graded. But one of the things that I thought was neat about the main character, this guy named Ender, is during his off time, all his activity, and to be sincere with you, kind of reminds me of Mike Tyson. I remember an interview with Mike Tyson, and he talks about how he studied Alexander the Great, how he studied Napoleon, how he studied Caesar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I find it because in Ender's Game, the guy on his off time was studying all these previous battles, right? And that's what a good commander should be doing. And then he was taking a series of his crew, and they were practicing new techniques for their these battleship games that they would have. And it kind of reminds me, like, I remember when I went to visit Budge recently, and it was pretty cool because the guys were doing rock portage, and I'm there drinking some cocktails, watching these guys get their asses handed to them, you know. But the high levels achievers, that's what they do. On their off time, they're still engaging. And one of the things I noticed too, and when you watch a lot of professional athletes, there's a lot of common denominators with professional athletes and guys in high level like commander units, because on their off time they're engaged doing stuff too. And I watch some of the stuff, like some of the training, like they try to make the stuff fun for the guys. Like they'll switch it up, like for hand-eye coordination, like they're messing with some type of ball. They're still engaging, but they're trying to make it fun in a different level. And even for guys like high level, I was at a big law firm, a good law firm. They went woke, and I got purged because of my political beliefs, in my opinion. But even like the executive chair, like that guy lived it 24/7. He was never out of the game. And I think like for me, because I never shot before I went into the Navy, I never shot a gun. And so I knew, like, and a lot of these guys, like, they grew up in Tennessee, Texas, and they had, family backgrounds of hunting. And that's where a lot of our best snipers come from, because they grew up hunting.
More reps.
Yeah. Well, and a comfortability, a skill,
Sure.
And so yeah, 100% I agree with you. If you yep.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, bro.
There's like I mentioned before we got started, I'm a big nerd. I like to learn more things because you'll end up seeing the same philosophies in different lines of work. And if you read about it in one philosophy and you can apply it in your other line of work, it doesn't make it inapplicable. You still can do it. So you find right pattern recognition. So
yes.
I just read this, man, years ago. I read this book called Math Counts, and it was about the kids of the world that are like, I don't know, junior high, and they all come together for big math competitions.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, so these people are competitive athletes in math, this big dork thing, which I liked. And the commonality was because they were studying these kids, and even in their off time when they're not competing or preparing to compete, they would make friends with the other competitors, and they would play more games, and they'd be more competitive, and they would invent games. Being creative. Hey, and you've done this. You have a ball and whatever. You have this new game, and you're like, hey, how many windows can I break? But in math comps, also, one, they were always doing things on the side, but when they were faced with math problems, the commonality between this small group and the rest of the world was simply that they stuck with the math problem longer before quitting, before they raised their hand and said, can I get some help, teacher? They simply stuck with it longer. It's the tying the shoe example. If you have your kid and you're always tying the kid's shoe, the kid's going to suck. Or you give them a Velcro shoe and they're a little bit better, but they still kind of suck, right? Well, the next evolution is better than that. What if you teach the kid how to tie the shoe, then he can go ahead and tie it himself? Having someone teach you, the person is giving you speed. You learn the lesson faster because someone taught you. But what if you don't teach the kid at all and you just say, sit here until you figure out how to tie a shoe? Well, at some point, some idiot had to come out with a way to tie the shoe, right?
Mm.
Well, if you sit there for a day or day and a half and you figure out how to tie a shoe, well, not only do you know how to tie a shoe, but you now have the creative component in your brain to create something from nothing. And that is such a small percentage of the world that you now have the knowledge, but now you also believe, hey, I can make something up and make it work. I can create a new widget or a new job or a new industry or a new Steve Jobs, Apple, iPhone, whatever. And next thing you know, everything changes because you have that one component where you can be creative. So sticking with it longer is huge. And then being creative is huge, to your point. I had a question about when you were going into, I'm always fascinated with buds because it's all mental and physical training, right? It's not really training you per se to deploy and how to jump out of planes a whole lot. That's later at Benning and wherever else. But there's a component of all that stuff. And deploying and being in the teams, that's the majority of your life as a SEAL. Buds is only X number of weeks. But going into that endeavor, were there any avenues, whether it's the O course or drown proofing or being up for 5 days with no food, were there any components that really thought, I'm kind of afraid of this next thing. I'm a little nervous about this. And then it's okay to have fear as long as you have a process to deal with it. It's not okay to have fear where the fear wins and you just break down and quit. But did you have anything you were like, oh man, I'm afraid of, either this person or this next piece? And what was your process for handling it?
Well, to be honest with you, I was afraid of everything to a certain degree. One, because the failure was basically shame. So definitely, I was afraid. One of the things we tried to do was very similar to some of the things you're trying to put out now, like for the 50-meter underwater swim. I remember like when we would eat, we would take turns, like we'd hold our breath and we'd time our watch. Like, all right, we're going to go for a minute. All right, we're going to go for a minute, 30 seconds. All right, we're 2 minutes. Or like when we're in our racks, all right, we're going to hold our breath. We're going to go for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but I'm going to be on my back on the bed in case I pass out. Or even when I went to Buds, I did a run along the Silver Strand. I saw a bunch of guys, white shirts, that means they haven't gone through Hell Week yet. And they were on their own time. They were going through the O course, trying to pick up things. So on their own time, they were out there trying to build confidence in the skill sets that they were going to be tested on to become more proficient. And, that reminds me, I did a swim called the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim, and Horace Gracie did the swim. And actually his son did the swim with him. And I talked to Horace Gracie, and I said, hey, because he's a big fan of the SEAL teams, and a lot of people may not know that. But I said, I really respect how you revolutionized martial arts, like across the planet. And I remember when I was a young guy, and how you would take on all these multiple opponents. And I was like, what's more important, courage or skill? And he said skill. He says, if you have skill, you don't need courage. Now there was a renowned SEAL that I'm friends with named Scrappy. And there's certain guys in the community that are renowned that not everybody knows, right? And Scrappy, like a lot of guys know who Jocko is, or a lot of guys know who Goggins is. In the SEAL teams, a lot of guys know who Scrappy is, and Scrappy was there. And I said, "Hey, Scrappy," I said, "I just talked to Horace, and I'm probably pronouncing his first name wrong, but trust me, I'm not bullshitting you." And I said, "Hey, I was just talking to Horace Gracie, and I said, I asked him what was more important, courage or skill, and he said skill, because if you have skill, you don't need courage." And I think Scrappy had a good answer. He says, "I think you need both. I think it takes skill and courage, because the truth is a lot of stuff that you do, like there's no doubt, like one of the reasons why SEALs are very good is because they're very proficient in their skill craft, right? It's the same reason why David beat Goliath. He was very skilled at that slingshot, keeping those wolves away. Like he was no joke with that weapon. Right? The same reason why Horace Gracie was, he was jiu-jitsu, he's at the highest level they get. And such a badass, because think about the mentality. Now he's doing a 3-mile open water swim with a group of SEALs. I'm sure he wasn't a bored swimmer. That's the beauty of that type of mentality, And think about me, like in my life, bro, I ain't never going to be rich. You know what I mean? I know it. It's all good. But you know what I have? I've had the ability to literally like have conversations with guys like that. Like so many beautiful guys. Like, and so when I talk about like, okay, I think Scrappy I can see why Horace Gracie said, if you have skill, you don't need courage. But I think Scrappy's answer is probably true too. I think you need both. Because there's no doubt how skilled Horace Gracie was. But damn, I'm sure he was a little afraid of some of those guys he went up against.
I'm always like, I deal, it's hard to deal with some absolutes, but even though I have some of my own, if someone says this or that, I would definitely want both. I'm not going to be hurt by both. But I got to believe that it's going to take some courage at some point to do the thing that's harder than what you've ever done, because you've only done certain things and you're inside your comfort zone now. Every time you move outside your comfort zone and you do something new that you've never done, that takes some level of courage, right? Maybe you did a 50-meter underwater swim. But in this instance, yeah, it's what we did in training. But for me to stay alive underneath this boat and not get detected, it's going to require a 75-meter underwater swim, right? So, hey, shit, I've never done this before. Here's my skill level. It's still going to take that leap of faith, that Soren Kierkegaard leap of faith, that, hey, I can probably make this next jump. So I think they kind of like go hand in hand, because you take that courage, you need that courage to do the next hard thing, which evolves your skill.
Yes.
When, before I want to make sure we don't get through the whole show and you don't give me any dirt on Kenny Beebe, because I'm going to text him as soon as I get off here. So if you have anything, and also if you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, I refer to him as the sexy assassin, because he's one of the best looking dudes I've ever seen. Right?
Whoa.
Right. and he's always with the jiu-jitsu and the martial arts. And but The Wolf of Wall Street is the movie with the record number of F-bombs in the movie industry. And so far to date, not even close, Kenny Beebe is the record number of F-bombs in the Athlete Builder podcast. But if you have any dirt on him, I'm going to need that before I get on the next couple of questions I want to get into and some things with you.
There's no Kenny's as beautiful as they get.
Yeah, now, he's the sexy assassin.
I can tell you a funny story about me and Kenny. One is I don't know if he told you this. I'm pretty sure he didn't. But
he told me about the bull sharks and swimming out there in New York, which he was afraid of.
So this one's a little funnier. So Kenny and I were like partners, and we were doing an FTX in the first phase of Buds at the end after Hell Week, and basically had this mock,
FTX.
full training exercise. It's an
Roger.
acronym.
Okay. Yep.
And so they had this like mock like POW camp. And they had all these guys who actually had quit before, or some guys who were waiting to phase up, and they were like the POWs. And our job was to sneak up and just basically, and they had like, and get a report and kind of observe it, right? And just that was basically it. They're just kind of teaching you like, how to observe and how to, techniques, stealth techniques, and they, you learn like at night, like movement draws attention and things like that. Well, so Kenny's with me, and we're pretty damn close. and they had like this walk, like this boardwalk, and that's where like the POWs were. And I saw like a newspaper right on the side, and I was like, Kenny, I was like, very, whisper. I was like, hey, we're gonna slowly like crawl up and get under this boardwalk, and we're gonna get the paper, the newspaper, and we'll be like fucking badasses, right? Because then later on during the debrief, we can give our report and then the fucking paper that we took,
Right.
So we wind up sneaking up really, really, really close. And I go to put my hand to get up the paper, and we get snagged. And so then what they do, because remember, the rest of our class is out there in the dark watching everything, And then they make us get naked, and they got a boat full of ice, and they made us get in this fucking boat, bro. And so, like, afterwards in a debrief, because everybody got to get up and say, their report, and then they're like, Brown and Beebe naked in the boat.
Oh man. I want to get into the combat swimmer and then your event.
Yeah.
How do you? What's the definition of a combat swimmer? What makes that different from just anything else? And then, so after that question, I'm going to ask you about your event.
Sure. So I think where it originates from is the Scouts and Raiders and the underwater demolition teams.
UDTs in the World War II.
Yep. And so those guys, some of those guys literally with a pair of UDT shorts, a K-bar
knife,
and like haversacks full of C4, they did a couple different things. One was to clear the beaches like in Normandy. They would
all the barriers, right?
Blow up some barriers, cut cable lines, things like that. Like with Bangalore mines, they would like push them up through the barbed wire, blow them up. The other things they would do, like with the when they were island hopping in the Pacific, they would scout the beaches, they would do these hydro reconnaissance, figure out where the best avenue to land, and if there was some type of obstacle, they would blow up the obstacle in the water. So they were the original frogmen, and they really were combat swimmers. So, and so that's where a combat swimmers, and a lot of stuff that we would do is some of the stuff, it's kind of common knowledge now is we could make ships, and certain ships that we didn't want to move for whatever reason, for logistical purposes, we could make sure that they stayed where they were for a little bit, and it wouldn't really have an American signature on it. And the other thing we could do is, back in the day, now it's different because there's satellites and things like that, is we could do things where certain ships could be tracked. And so a lot of that stuff had to do with doing, frogmen type of combat swimmer ops where, late at night you're diving and doing stuff. And one of the other things we do is hydro reconnaissance. And a lot of that has to do with swimming. And so, being confident in the water is a skill set. And I'll tell you the truth. In third phase, they have you use old style UDT frogman type of training where they have these haversacks of C4, where it's basically backpacks loaded with C4. And what you would do is they'll have these, a Japanese scully is a form of beach obstacle that prohibits an amphibious assault, and it's very cheap in its construction. It's a pyramid or a block shape of cement, and they put rebar up the top. And what happens is it's below the surface line, but when these LSUs, these landing support craft come up, they'll get anchored up and they'll be shooting targets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the water's, just deep enough where guys, you get a shit ton of guys that really aren't that good in the water and they're getting shot at, it's not going to be good for them. And so one of the trainings for us, and I think it has a lot of real aspects, is you go under the water on a breath hold and you got to secure this haversack of C4 around this cement obstacle. Now, it doesn't seem that hard, but let me tell you something. When the surf is pushing you into the cement and then it's taking you back down, it's difficult.
I imagine so.
And you can't let go.
Right.
You just, because you can't. Let me tell you, if you let a haversack of C4 go, goodbye to your SEAL career, right?
Right.
And so it's real pressure on the performance. And the other thing is the visibility in the surf zone or right next to the surf zone isn't the best. And so it's very good training. And one of the things I didn't talk about, but I need to, because we were talking about like one of the advantages to intense training, right? And we were talking about some of the grind in wrestling and boxing or football. There's a certain intensity to some of those programs that builds a mentality that's that I think is a great attribute. And I didn't realize in SEAL training exactly what was happening, right? There was one experience that 100% was like a huge spotlight that made me realize what this training how it had changed our mentality and a performance level. And it was this. So we were going through dive phase, which is after Hell Week. And we were going to learn the Dregular 5s, which is a closed circuit breathing apparatus. But before that, we were using open scuba tanks, twin 80s. And some of the FBI HR team, hostage rescue team was going through. Now, they weren't getting the beat down stuff like we were, but they did participate in some of the pool diving evolutions, and this was one. And in this phase, this evolution was very similar to the majority of first phase, whereas it was built on reward via competition performance. And here was, they divided the class in half, and the length of the pool is 25 meters. And I know that without a doubt, because in a 50-meter water swim, you do one side, you do a flip, and you do the other side, and that's 50 meters. But what they did is they have an MC underwater, and they can talk to you. And they had us with our twin 80s, and they said, hey, they split the class up in half, and they said, all right, remove your tanks. And so we remove our tanks. They said, put them on the ground of the pool. They said, all right, remove your weight belts, put your weight belts over your tanks. And they did that so the tanks don't float. And then they said, all right, I want you to turn off your air and put your regulator underneath the weight belt so it's nice and kind of compact in there. Now you're on a straight breath hold. Now they said, I want you to swim. When we hit the buzzer, you're going to swim to the other side, and you're going to do whatever you can to get air. And each time we're going to remove we're gonna remove a tank or two. Well, so you get to the other side, and there's a guy trying to, if you're there first, there's a guy there trying to grab you off, you trying to wrestle you off your tank, right? And so sooner or later, someone's got to give, right? And it's normally the guy who gives up on a breath hold. And so, but the thing is, when you're breathing compressed air, because of Boyle's law, you can't just shoot to the surface, or you can get an air gas embolism. You could get nitrogen narcosis. So what you have to do is you have to basically kiss the bottom of the pool and blow bubbles, because under compressed air, as the pressure releases, the cavity will expand. So you have to basically purge that air as before it can expand or can puncture your lungs, tension pneumothorax, or air gas embolism. So what would happen was, everybody knows that, right? So what happens is, you're going to see what's what. Well, within like literally the first 2 times, and I think we had like 5 FBI guys, they were like, they let us know, they said all the FBI guys have now left the water. And that meant that here were these college-educated guys in FBI in their HRT team, which means they were no joke. But when it came to SEAL candidates who made it through Hell Week, they were the first to ring the bell, hypothetically. And so to me, there was a real because remember, I was a rough and tumble kid. The Navy 100% saved my life, like 100%. And to me, it showed me like, okay, it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of those guys went to some, pretty good colleges, and they were pretty good athletes. Like, these guys were serious, but it showed me like it really, like, that's a lot of things. Like, a lot of times people, like, they talk about it's not the size of the dog, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Right. And I think that's true to a lot of extent. And it's a huge measurement that's unaccounted for in a lot of things in life.
100%. The willing to not give in and just keep going. Yeah, we talked about that, and you're absolutely right. And the 3 sports you were in, those are big builders of it. What's the name of your swim event?
So the swim is called the New York City SEAL Swim. And it does it for, number one, it sends a positive patriotic message of unity for our entire country. And number two, it's a nationally televised event. It brings a lot of great people together, a lot of SEALs, a lot of guys in special warfare, a lot of guys in law enforcement, a lot of guys, firefighters, and a lot of like Division I swimmers, triathletes. It brings a really cool crowd together of good people, and we send. I call it adventure therapy. We get together, raise a lot of money for the Navy SEAL Foundation, and we represent our communities with honor. And I think one of the things too is a lot of people don't realize how beautiful our country is. Like, our country really is beautiful. We're working on a lot of things, but yeah, it is really beautiful. And I've been to a lot. There's a reason why millions and millions of people want to come to our country, because in comparison, it's the best thing going on.
So in your event, it's in New York City, right?
That's right.
And then, so there's a land component and a water component. And it's not just anyone can do it that wants to, right? I don't really have much swim training at all. I can swim, but I don't have that training and background. So you either need to be, if I read the site correctly, either a SEAL or someone in SWIC, or you need to be tested out, right? You got to pass some tests to see if you can handle the volume of the workload. So what is the overall workload of the swimming and the pull-ups, push-ups, or go over that component next?
Okay, cool. So the tides and currents in the Hudson are no joke, right? For safety reasons, I got to make sure everybody who enters the event is confident in the water to where they can keep up with the pack of SEALs and safely swim across the Hudson, because it's no joke. And so what it entails of is it entails, one is, first it was just for SEALs. Then we opened it up to, everybody who served, then the police officers and firefighters, and then just to anybody who wants to get out there and send a positive message and help the Navy SEAL Foundation. And if you want to check more about it, you can go to Google Navy SEAL Foundation, New York City SEAL Swim, check out the website. So the event is this. We started Empty Sky Memorial. And Empty Sky Memorial is a monument off Jersey Shore that it's a silhouette of how the Twin Towers looked from the Jersey side. And inside, it has the names engraved of all those lost from New Jersey on 9/11. So we have that. We start there. We have a couple powerful speakers. SEALs are like laconic, which means we're not very long-winded guys, and we really don't appreciate like long-winded type of guys either. And so we have like some guys in the SEAL community who put a lot of work for our country, kind of say a few words. We always, in any event where I'm a leader, and before I did before I jumped out of any airplane, I always said a prayer, right? I'm what you would call a foxhole Christian, right? But I am smart enough to realize when anything's under my leadership, it's probably a good thing to give glory to God. So we say a prayer, we say national anthem, and then we do a flag run from Empty Sky Memorial, and Ellis Island will be on the side along the Bulkway of the Hudson to Flag Plaza, the southernmost side of Liberty State Park. From there, guys will change out. I'll have a swimmer's inspection to make sure they got an ankle tracklet bracelet on.
How far is the run?
It's a little over a mile.
Okay.
But it's not a straight haul-ass run. We call it a bud shuffle because in buds, you never walk. But you do, like when you're with your class, you kind of do a formation type of slow jog. So that's how it's like a formation jog with our flags. By the way, we hold them real high. And we have short shorts on. A lot of guys are in really, really good shape. Makes it tough for me, because I don't want to be the guy with the dad bod. Unfortunately, I am. But what happens is get a good head count. Make sure they got their swimmer buoy on so we can track them. Their ankle tracking bracelet on, and make sure I have a good head count. The tides and currents are really dialed in. New Jersey State Police helped me a lot with that. Then we'll swim to Ellis Island. Now, my mistake. We'll swim to Statue of Liberty, which is a beautiful thing, bro. She's got a torch of freedom right there. And it's just iconic every time you see it, right? And then we swim right by her. I got a Don John Marine Company, Inc. Lets us borrow one of their barges. Well, actually, two of their barges. The Statue of Liberty has a perimeter zone. Right outside that perimeter zone, they drill down, and we come up the barge, and we do 100 push-ups and 22 pull-ups to honor our nation's freedoms and civil liberties. I make sure I get a good head count. I give my slower swimmers a chance to recoup. We pop back in the water, and we swim to Ellis Island, which is really, really iconic too, because you think about what the Statue of Liberty represents, freedom and the civil liberties that our country is about, and how many Americans who came from different places, different walks of life. These are some of the first huge iconic landmarks that they saw, Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, because our country is really built on a large part of various levels of immigration, right? And so what happens here is on Ellis Island, we celebrate our nation's diversity and all the men and women who came to our country for a better life. And guess what we do? We do 100 push-ups and 22 pull-ups to honor that and them. And then the same thing, I get a full head count. I let the guys hydrate, make sure my slower swimmers get a little chance to rest. Then we do the long swim. So from Statue of Liberty, from Liberty State Park to Statue of Liberty is about a half a mile. And then from Statue of Liberty to Ellis Island's about a half a mile. And now we go across the Hudson to South Cove Marina into Lower Manhattan. And that's about 2 miles. Now, a lot of times it gets really choppy out there. And in ocean water swimming, your guiding is really important because if you zigzag, your swim can be a lot longer. And so once we get to Statue of Liberty, to South Cove Marina in Lower Manhattan, I got a decon station so guys can get that nasty water off right away. I let guys hydrate a little bit. I make sure I get a full head count and then change out from their fins to their sneakers, grab American flags, and then we'll do another flag run all the way to World Trade Center and where the Twin Towers got hit in 9/11. Now, one of the things that's really beautiful is, NYPD and FDNY are always a big part of this event. And when I was starting up this event, a lot of the leadership, they were there on 9/11. I was a SEAL on 9/11, so they really helped me in putting this together, and the Port Authority as well. When we come into the World Trade Center, NYPD, PAPD, Pipers are playing for us. It's pretty awe-inspiring, So we get to the World Trade Center, and at the first responder statue, we do 100 push-ups and 22 pull-ups to honor all those lost in 9/11 and everybody who put it on the line for our country. It's a really beautiful thing. And and then of course at the end we have some people speak. And normally what I have is survivors of 9/11 or family members who lost their lives on 9/11. And it's really good for us because like I was a SEAL on 9/11. I went to war, And for a lot of us, it's really good to, it makes things full circle for us, and it's just a really beautiful moment. It's a beautiful event. It brings a lot of great people together.
How many years have you done it?
This will be my, holy cow, I'm feeling old. This will be my 6th year.
How much money have you guys raised?
It's raised millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
I didn't say this to start off the show, but, thank you and your family for your service.
Thank you for your patriotism, man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned also that you said you wanted 2 things you want to talk about. One was the event you have coming up, and I love that. We have a foundation at our gym, and breast cancer is a big thing, and we do a MRF for Memorial Day for family readiness group here locally, then also the Michael Murphy Foundation. Then we have a foundation for kids that are special needs or kids that are troubled, have been arrested and stuff, or they can't afford to train with us. So we have some
guys like me,
right?
Don't count us out.
So we have some things so they can come train with us. So
beautiful.
Love how giving money or like giving back with your time and talent and your funds is huge, right? Because we're asked to make an impact professionally, personally, and then emotionally with other folks. So this endeavor of yours is huge. It's huge, so that's just amazing.
Hey, brother, I appreciate that. To be honest with you, though, it's events of therapy for me and my brothers. Like, that's the core of it. I think it does more for us than any of the funds that it raised that goes to help other veterans.
Sure.
Because when you got, I remember like when I was younger and they had like this NCAA commercial and they were talking about how a mine is a terrible thing to waste. And I think that is so true, And then I saw like one of the things that they did is they had like a lot of role models for the Black community. And I remember as a veterans advocate, especially when I was an undergrad and at law school at Rutgers, that's one of the things I tried to show is like, look, there's such this big negative stereotype of veterans. It's like what we need is to show more guys out there kicking ass and just having a great time in life and doing well, right? To kind of erase this negative stigma. Because I've had friends, that have gone through job interviews and they found out that they were like served in Iraq. They're like, are you okay right now? And it's such bullshit. And I think that type of bias really is one of the reasons why there's high levels of unemployment for veterans. And and poor graduation rates for veterans. Because to be honest with you, a lot of it, I think, has to do with politics, because veterans tend not to be liberal. And so, people tend not really to give a shit about it. So that's what I try to do, is I really try to be out there, like, showing us kicking ass, having fun. And that's what that swim's about. It's adventure therapy. And it does more for guys in the water swimming because it's such an intensive type of logistical lift. And every year I'm like, fuck, man, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is fucking soaking up my whole life. But when I see the way guys are buzzing, when they're doing push-ups and pull-ups right by the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island or at the World Trade Center, or they're getting out of the water right after they finish this kick-ass swim and they're all like loving each other, or when guys are with pride with the flags and they got the PAPD and NYPD pipers playing and FDNY pipers playing for them, it energizes everybody. And they're hearing family members of those lost on 9/11, and they know that they want the war to hold those motherfuckers accountable, like, and that they were part of real justice. Like, to me, there's nothing better than that.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what it's really about.
I also looked in your bio and some things that you said about, you want to be an attorney. You did some political work, and you said that you see that the country is struggling and having some challenges. In some ways, it's in decline. And I don't know that people really know this, but everything has a life cycle. Whether you watch the movie The Matrix or you look at your own life, everyone starts off young, and then they have that growth phase, and then they mature and plateau, and then they go into decline. So every person does that. Every business does that. Every country does that. Every dynasty does that. There's the Khans and the Visigoths and the fall of Rome, right? So at one time, Brits were considered like, they were running the empire of the world. And then people say that the United States is a superpower now. Well, you also look at the overall health, obesity rate, mortality rate, diabetes, heart disease in the country, and you can say, hey, there's definite trends of why the Roman Empire fell. There's definite trends of why the country is struggling now. And one of the things that you talked about is that there's some things that the country's struggling with that you're working to fight against. What are like one or two items or pieces of advice that, hey, I see this problem, here is a solution. I see this issue, here's what I would recommend doing so that you can handle this problem?
Well, one of the things I like about podcast is it's real. It's real. Me and you here talking, it's all real, right? And what that does is a lot of the media information out there you get is basically one way or another, it's influenced by some entity or entities, right? It's not real like this is real. And it's a good way to circumvent things, right? And so this is one perspective of we the people. And the preamble of the Constitution starts with we the people. Now, the Constitution, right? The Constitution was born out of war. It was born out of war. And it's got some beautiful ideas that I thoroughly believe in, right? The right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? Due process, equality, right? Freedom of speech, the fact that we, the people, get to decide our leaders, the separation of powers to keep ambition, to check tyranny. These are all beautiful ideas. Now, the founders were 100% flawed, many of them, and slavery was 100% wrong and adverse to many of the ideas transcribed in the Constitution. But our country's taking great measures you had the Civil War to combat slavery, right? Men with courage and guns ended that. Like a lot of atrocities, and here's the truth. Like people say, let me tell you, what ended the Holocaust? Men with weapons and courage ended the Holocaust. The same thing that ended slavery. That's why courage is such a underrated value. It's one of the greatest attributes next to intelligence, courage. And so one of the things I look at is like, okay, then you had the civil rights movement, and you had a lot of great leaders there, right? Then you had the women's suffrage movement. You had a lot of great leaders there. And then you even had the gay and lesbian movement, and you had a lot of leaders there, right? Because all is that about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Equality. I believe in all those ideas. But now we've taken a backward step with cancel culture. And really what cancel culture is, it's basically political discrimination to shut down the voice of an opposing perspective. Now, I believe in freedom of speech, and why do I think freedom of speech is so important? Because freedom of speech, like capitalism, is like me and you here talking about ideas, right? If my ideas are flawed, well, let the people hear it and weigh it out for themselves. Don't muzzle me up so I can't contribute to the open market of ideas. Because in capitalism, right, like Apple products, they're well priced and they're reliable. And so guess what? Their stock rises. And that's the same with ideas. But what happens with all these social media platforms and corporate media is when they're all tainted to one perspective and they shut down others, guess what? It doesn't give we the people the chance to evaluate what ideas are valid and what ideas are flawed. And a chance to weigh it out. And so that's why I'm heavily opposed to the infringements on free speech, that basically which is because the ability to reach masses of people with big tech and with technology nowadays, and to influence things in subtle ways, that if you don't have the ability to address things, then what right that really matter, then what right do you really have? If I can't talk about, maybe I disagree with this vaccine and that they're going to shut down my restaurant, or they're going to shut down my gym, or I'm not going to be able to go to work unless I get a vaccine. And if I post it on social media and I get shut down by social media, like what rights do I really have? Like that happened. And a lot of people lost their jobs. Now I say, hey, there's pros and cons there's pros to the vaccine 100%. There's cons to it 100%. We the people should have had the right to debate that freely in open market of ideas. And the government, with joint activity through big tech, took drastic actions to limit that. That 100% happened. So that's one small example. Now, the other big issue I'm really concerned about is I'm concerned about due process. And I'm concerned about lawfare and the use of political hack prosecutors to go after political opponents for a couple reasons. One, it's similar to what happened with Trump. First, they shut down Trump from social media. And Trump's not just a president or presidential candidate. He's actually a leader of a movement. And it's actually almost like a global type of movement. And so if they could do it to Trump, have no doubt they could do it to others. And not only did they do it to others, they did. A lot of my friends, a lot of SEALs who had issues with the vaccines, they had their businesses hurt and jeopardized because they marketed on social media. And when they spoke up against these vaccines, they were shut down. They lost tens of thousands of followers on various social media platforms, and their businesses hurt because of it. And a lot of them basically were shook. And so once they got back on paying compliance, guess what? They were muzzled up. They didn't have the followers, the numbers they had before. And guess what? They didn't speak out against the vaccines, or they were deterred and chilled from engaging in political perspectives that weren't mainstream. That is a travesty, because our nation is founded on free speech, right? Free speech is extremely important. Now, the other thing that happens, well, even look at our academic institutions now, our great premier institutions of learning. There's free speech is non-existent on most of those campuses. Your very life could be in danger, especially if you support Israel and if you're a Jewish student, right? If you're opposed to some of these other controversial topics, as far as not the proper use of pronouns, like your grades could be hurt, you could be shunned. Like they literally, they have chilled free speech on our premier institutions. That is a travesty, because there's no greater gift to someone to give than education. And one of the best parts of education is critical thinking and ability to debate and free speech. That's what our college campuses were supposed to be about. That's not the case now. And I'm really scared of law warfare for similar matters, because look, they bankrupted Giuliani. He was the mayor of New York City during 9/11. It's a travesty what happened to him. They bankrupted him, right? And not only that, they're trying to bankrupt Trump, and they're trying to put him in jail for what's in my case is basically corrupt prosecution, and it's 100% politically motivated. They got him handcuffed in New York so he can't have massive rallies across the country because he's tied up in a courtroom. Like, it's totally engineered because they have a weak presidential candidate. And so I'm very, very concerned, especially when we talk about free speech. Think about on social media during the last presidential campaign with people who spoke up against about the Hunter Biden laptop story. They were shut down. Right? And it turns out that information was true. They shut that information down to keep it from basically being considered by the American voting population. Like, this is some really scary, intense stuff. When you basically have bureaucrats in our intelligence networks and even our judicial system having their foot on the scale on the American political process. I mean, it's very concerning. And I will tell you the truth. I've been to law school. Law schools are very woke. They are very woke. And that's bled into our big law firms, and that's bled into our judicial system. And so my concern is this, especially with this. When you have attorney generals getting involved in commercial transactions in real estate in New York City based on someone's political perspective or the fact that they're on the other side of the aisle, I think that's really scary stuff, because now you're messing with commerce. You're messing with international and national commerce. It's really scary stuff. It's about as scary as it can be. And so what are my solutions? These are my solutions. One is kind of like this is what I know. And case in point, David Goggins. There we were getting fucking hammered. And nobody thought that it was going to get turned around. And it got turned around because one guy had a beautiful idea to just flip it upside down. And so I have no doubt, I have many experiences where good men have turned things around. And I know that courage, we talked about courage before. Courage can be like COVID, right? It can spread like wildflower. It can spread that fast, and all of a sudden you got everybody in the boat crew, and people see, right? People see what's going on. And so I say this, have the courage to speak up, because the more good men and women that speak up and do it in a reasonable manner. I don't want you to go out there shutting down streets or intimidating people, getting in people's faces. Like, you're not going to change anybody's perspective doing that. I say be the grown-ups in the room. absolutely speak up. 100% speak up. It's too important not to. I don't want to live in a society where number one, I have to worry about my business transactions unless I fly the whatever woke flag they want me to fly. Like, okay, to be sincere, there's a lot of anti-Americanism out there. First they want you to fly the BLM flag. Then they want you to fly the rainbow flag. Then they want you to fly the Ukraine flag. Then they want you to fly the Palestinian flag. Dude, I'm just flying the American flag. That's it. And I'm going to speak up. A country is too important not to.
That's a whole show. That's a whole line of shows, that whole topic right there.
Yeah.
Two things I noticed, when people are really hurting, like after 9/11, for the next 6 months, 12 months, every time I drove home, everyone had a flag in there hanging out. And so all the streets had it, right? All the houses had it. So when we're under attack, we seem to be galvanized then because, shoot, things got really bad, and you start to have some better perspective, and you really value what you have. And then 2 years later, people take it for granted, and then the flags are gone, this and that. I know it was like, having a small business, and COVID shut it down. The ATF was checking out my business, the one next door. I have no idea where they had jurisdiction, but they're like, hey, you can't be open, so there was a lot of that nonsense going on. The whole premise that we're founded on having different ideas, and that's okay, is what brings the best ideas to the top. When I was for one point, I was a trader for a local hedge fund, and I would do the opening and closing for all the long and short positions with our equity positions. And the portfolio manager was a former Air Force fighter pilot. And before the opening bell, I would come in, here's our portfolio of stocks, here's what we're looking to do, here's the price points, ranges, etc. And we would have our game plan. At the end of the day, we'd have our debrief. And it was very militaristic because he grew up in the military. And he's just asked me question after question after question when I'm making essentially this pitch on why we're changing these positions in the stock. I go, man, Chris, what's going on? He's like, Jim, I'm just a big believer in that Socratic method where we just keep asking enough questions. Sooner or later, the best idea that we have at that time is going to come to the surface, and then we're going to act on it. Now, at that time, the best idea still could be wrong, but we're still making our educated guess. We're making our call. So he was much more experienced, but the whole point was that he wanted more information. He wanted more input. So being able to do that was huge. So I totally hear that as well. And then doing it in a respectful way where it's not violent and everyone's just trying to bring the best ideas to the surface is really the only way to do it, because everything else isn't sustainable. Now, Bill, we can keep going. I like keep going. We can go for hours. It's still sunny here, so whatever. But I want to be respectful of your time. So I always have these rapid fire questions at the end. So I want to kind of wrap up with that. I'm going to throw in a couple extra, but there's kind of like short questions, short answers. When you're training, when you're lifting or you're running, what do you like to listen to?
It depends. I think most of the time what I want to listen to is I want to listen to something pretty intense that's going to kind of get me fired up to like, I want to be the guy, like when I work out, that's like, I'm in it and I want the music to get me there.
Gotcha. What's a bucket list adventure you haven't gone on yet that you want to do?
Bucket list adventure I haven't gone on yet. I would love to ride a motorcycle from San Diego to San Francisco, right along the coast.
My wife and I were in San Diego last year. My cousin got married, and I had only been there one other time. And I said, hey, if we go over to San Diego again, there's this thing I want to do. And she goes, what's that? So, well, I want to stay at the Hotel Del and have kind of partied up there. She goes, what else? I go, for some reason I fell in love with this McPee's. bar. And she goes, why? Well, because I always, have some regrets about the whole not checking out the Navy and the SEAL thing. But, it's just average food and all. But, I still have those mugs that hang from those rafters that are right above the bar. So, we really enjoyed our time in San Diego last year. So,
it's a
so riding
beautiful
a
city.
motorcycle around. Yep. What's your favorite sports movie?
The Quest.
The Quest. Okay. Favorite sport to watch?
Football.
Favorite athlete to watch?
Favorite athlete to watch? There's so many great athletes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess probably dating myself, but Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit. Favorite book, if you have one.
Favorite book.
Or favorite book right now.
Favorite book. It would probably be it's basically the memoirs of Julius Caesar, and because it's very interesting, and I would recommend it to anybody who wanted to become a SEAL or anybody in the military. Because back then there's a lot of memoirs, but this is actually when he was in the campaigns, and it's been translated. And what happens is he would write about it, and of course it's full of PR for Julius Caesar Pro, but he would send it out and it would get disseminated and read in like the town squares throughout Rome. And that's kind of how his like PR. Now, like Napoleon had some newspapers, and he basically kind of duplicated the process that Julius Caesar did. But I really like that because it talks a lot about the tactics, a lot about the issues that he had to face, and the various ways they problem solved. And when I think about Julius Caesar, right, he's the most, when you talk about how pain and the silver lining in pain sometimes, Julius Caesar conquered most of Europe, which was tribal warfare, especially all of Gaul, which is France. But one of the things he did by doing that is made it civilized in a lot of different ways, and it changed their perspectives where they started to value engineering, and it just started to value, Greek concepts, of philosophy and education and rational reasoning. And if you look at, and one of the other interesting things about Julius Caesar is he always used engineering. And I look at some of the things why Rome was so successful, and I look at some of the places where we weren't as successful as militarily we were successful, but let's say in Afghanistan. One of the things the Romans did is they had these big engineering projects. That was like a prime example to everybody that, look, this is a better way of life. So they conquered by the sword, but I think they civilized by their engineering. And if we would have had some massive engineering projects in Afghanistan or even Iraq, because we had a lot of high levels of unemployment there, that there's high levels of unemployment made them very susceptible to Islamic jihadism. I think if they had a job and a paycheck and you could see progress and, imagine these kind of similar to, I think Roosevelt did in these big construction projects where they had high levels of unemployment during the Great Depression. Imagine if they had like big highway surface infrastructure projects or big building projects where, keep building, water plants and all types of things that would help their society, big like commercial transport type of systems and things like that could make their way of living so much better. I think probably had a better outcome.
Gotcha. Well, I took 3 years of Latin in high school and had to translate Caesar's Gallic Wars, and I hated it. So,
yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Favorite
Yes.
favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero.
Doesn't have to be comic book, but oftentimes people will give that kind of answer. But
I would have to say Batman.
and then villain. Oh, go ahead.
Batman.
Yeah. And
Because
then villain?
I had bad ears. What?
Favorite villain?
Favorite villain. Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
No kidding. Precious. Favorite lift in the gym?
Favorite lift in the gym would be lat pull downs because I can really work my triceps.
All right. If you had 10 million, what kind of job would you have?
If I had 10 million, what type of job would I have? I'd probably be some type of professional football player. Not a superstar, but I'd be on the field.
All right. Favorite quote?
We get beat, rise, and fight again. That's Daniel Green.
Nice. What's a good watch for someone in your line of work in the SEALs?
I guess a G-Shock is what, when I was in the day. Right now, for me, this works. Just an Apple Watch like everybody else. Oh, you got a G-Shock?
I like it. I can hit it with a hammer, and it's durable and it doesn't break, so I like it quite a bit.
Hey, back in the day, that's what I was rocking too.
What do you miss about being with the teams?
The Cowboy guys.
Definitely
a lot of tough love, but you don't realize how special guys are and the guys you're working with till you get out. 100%. And I think that's one of the really cool things about these fun patriotic events like the New York City SEAL Swim is you bring a few guys like that together and you have a good time.
Where can people find you or this event, Bill?
Hey, Google up New York City Navy SEAL Swim. It's August 10th. I always try to have it as close as I can to the anniversary of Extortion 17. And you can also check me out on Instagram, Freedom Spirit 77. Hey, Jim, thank you so much for having me on. I think we talked about a lot of good stuff out there. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Oh, Bill, great time. For those that are listening, if you continue to send us your questions, info@athlete-builder.com. Looking forward to our next one. But Bill, today, really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the gift of your time, your knowledge, your authenticity, your overall intent to try to take this time together and get our listeners better. So, Bill, thank you for the gift today. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your service.
Hey, Jim, thank you. It's a form of immortality because this later on can be kind of absorbed later on, long after us. So
that's the
good
idea.
ideas out there. We were real, man.
Yes, sir.
All
right, Bill.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.